Everyone for your patience. And yeah, welcome to another event for CLF Alberta. We have Josh Jacobs with us. I'll let him introduce himself in a few moments, but I just wanted to let everybody know that, of course, you can check clfalberta.com for all of our upcoming events, including appearing at Buildex in Calgary, October 18th and 19th. And we also have our first sustainability social event. So we're excited to host that. And that's on the 17th, the night before Buildex at Craft Beer Market. So please visit our website to register for all those events. And also, of course, we always say our goal is to host events that radically reduce embodied carbon and empower industry professionals to do that. So another good way to get resources and case studies is to visit www.carbonleadershipforum.org. So they have all the case studies and resources, everything from policy to MEP information as well. So wanted to make sure everybody knows about that. And without further ado, we'll get started. And thank you. Please kick it off, Josh.
Yeah, thanks everyone. If you guys are having a beer event, I'm certainly I don't know how I would lower my embodied carbon by flying up there, but certainly sounds like something I'd be excited to do. Again, apologies, folks, for the confusion over where I was in the world. I was actually somewhere. My name is Josh Jacobs. I'm Sustainability Director with WAP Sustainability. We're the largest LCA provider here in North America. But I'm here today to talk about the MEP 2040 group, which obviously was spawned out of Carbon Leadership Forum. Let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see it.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to go into presentation mode, which the only part of that sucks is I can't really see anyone else. Please, a couple things to note is please just jump in if you have a question. I don't know if that's Kristen, that's how you guys run your meetings, but I am not one of those people that like has a train of thought or will be taken off my train of thought or anything like that. So please just ask your question. I'm not going to feel perturbed or anything like that if someone asks in the middle. So
yeah, I'll watch the chat and let you know. Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Yeah. So again, wanted to introduce the MEP 2040, Mechanical, Electrical, Plumbing 2040 Challenge. Basically, here's our mission, right? We want all systems engineers advocating for and achieving net zero carbon in their projects, operational carbon by 2030 and embodied carbon by 2040. Sorry, got a nose, don't want to sneeze. So essentially, we've been trying to move forward on a lot of this conversation around carbon, obviously. Operational carbon, the engineering world has been doing a really good job on that for years and years, right? We've been trying to lower carbon for a long, long time. So it's the embodied carbon side that we've really needed some help on. Certain parts of this, I would call one of the leaders on the planet in. Other parts, I'm a novice. So hopefully I'll be able to answer your questions or at least get folks to be able to answer some questions if we do go in depth in those areas that I'm not exactly the expert. So again, what is it? So we have a steering committee that I'll get to in a second, but we are asking for commitments from engineering firms, right? And it's basically from the Carbon Leadership Forum, again, that system engineering advocating for and achieving net zero carbon in their projects by 2030 for operation, 2040 by embodied carbon. And again, it came out of the Carbon Leadership Forum. 2040 is a date that we believe we can actually hit. Obviously defining net in the net zero very specifically in certain ways. But again, there's a couple different things that I want to run through in what we're asking people to commit to. They're over here on the right-hand side, but we'll run through them pretty specifically in each area as we go. So I mentioned the steering committee. I'm one of a number of us who have stepped up to volunteer our time to hopefully lead the MEP 2040 group. Again, it is not a pay organization, just asking people to sign on. Either as a signatory, which we were up to 73 last I looked. These are 73 different firms around the world that have signed up to commit to getting to zero through the MEP 2040 programs. And then there are supporters who are not necessarily engineering firms, but they are organizations that have either expertise in this area to help, like ours down here, WAP Sustainability, or purchasing organizations like Amazon, or not-for-profits like New Buildings Institute, or construction firms like Turner, and others who can help in this move to zero. So the first thing that we're asking people to do is actually establish a plan. So this sounds like a rudimentary thing, like, hey, like we should just establish a plan to get there. Yeah, believe it or not, there's not a ton of organizations out in the marketplace that actually have set up a plan on how they're going to address their carbon, right? What is your plan to reduce operational carbon? Again, targeting by 2030. Plan to reduce embodied carbon target by 2040, right? So setting those targets, really lowering as you go. What have you learned so far? Where are your reductions? How do you plan to address it with your clients and even within your own organization? And then measure and report annual progress to them. This overlaps with a number of other programs that we'll talk about out there in the marketplace. But bring case studies to groups. Again, sharing the lessons you've learned as you've gone. And then obviously data in the marketplace and the community that is around MEP 2040. Obviously sharing progress on your website so you can get credit for what's going on in the marketplace is something that's incredibly important as well. Obviously, we all know that sustainability, while being the right thing, is also actually a good marketing thing at the moment. So hopefully most people are sharing when they're setting these goals, and obviously when they're helping to reach them. There's a number of organizations that have done this. One example is Bureau Happold. They have a 2021 report, Key Achievements, out in the marketplace, where what they've done in terms of their CO2 per person, their absolute tonnage of CO2 equivalent, and the difference that they've made in time, right, in their different greenhouse gas scopes. Scope 1 and Scope 2, and then Scope 3 broken down in a couple of different areas: business travel, electricity usage, commuter travel, and other things. So they've actually put out some comprehensive reports around what they've been doing, and they are one of they have people that sit on our steering committee, and obviously have been very committed to this. There's also an organization in White and Company that has an embodied carbon action plan that can actually be found on MEP2040.org. As you can see, they actually talk about how they will reduce operational embodied carbon across MEP systems on all their projects. Again, looking to target that zero by 2040. And you can actually go in and read the plan inside, again, MEP2040.org. So the second area is looking to low GWP refrigerants, low impact refrigerants. This is the area of the world that I will say I am not the foremost expert on. I am not, I am not a refrigerant expert, but I certainly understand how it's impacted us, right? We certainly want to use refrigerants within our material, in our mechanical material that we're using, to obviously lead to better comfort for us in our indoor environments. The problem is, for years, our refrigerants were actually part of the problem, right? And we obviously dealt with that. In a couple slides here, I'm actually going to go over some of the major landmark global initiatives that have addressed some of this, and obviously what engineers have been doing for years and years, and manufacturers of equipment, rooftop equipment and things of that nature, that are helping address some of this. But the thing is, it's also a major, major part of embodied impact, right? So the actual embodied impact of having refrigerants and simply having used them, obviously leakage and other things, and potentially even the end of life of refrigerants, are all these embodied impacts. This is just an example of what a life cycle stages look like. See, here are some of the labels that we put on each section. And you notice that operational, this area we've been so focused on, and again, very, very important. Please, nothing I say today should take away from the operational reductions that we're trying to make and push forward with, and have made great strides in over the years. But there are lots and lots of areas of these embodied. And again, refrigerants touch in lots of those different areas. Again, one of the largest concerns with refrigerants is actually the leakage risk, right? So it's doing exactly what we're asking it to, and we actually have the programs to do take-back programs and different things like that. and to recover this and reuse it in the correct manner and things of that nature. But the problem is there are just so many different areas, from the production of the refrigerant to actually placing it into the bottles, to the wholesale area, to the charging and refill, to actual in use, to recovery, technically after they've been picked up in the technician van. All these different areas are areas where leakage happens. There's numerous amounts of data in the marketplace where we're showing again and again that the leakage behind refrigerants is actually our biggest impact area when it comes to refrigerants, not really the use. There's lots of different things being put in place to hopefully address all these, but human nature, we know we're part of the problem here. You see most of these areas, it's where we end up screwing up somewhere. So I mentioned that we've known about this for a long time, right? We've known that the refrigerants we're using are impacting the ozone layer and other parts of our atmosphere. So we've actually had global agreements, whether it be the World Plan of Action on Ozone Layer in 1977, which come to find out ozone layer is healing, or fully healed in great many places. So we've done a lot from that standpoint. The Montreal Protocol in 1989, the Kyoto Protocol of 1997. We started to reduce things in terms of the global warming potential impact of our refrigerants. Apologies, we have a national test of our system down here in the US. So my phone, even though it's off, still had to go on. My apologies for that. So again, even all the way into 2015 and 2016, the Kigali Accord, we literally really reduced our global warming potential of our refrigerants in great ways. We know exactly what to do. We have had some of this refrigerant concepts before, but we're also trying to make sure that we're safe when it comes to refrigerants, right? Our refrigerants, some of these things under pressure and in certain areas are not, the fire departments are not the biggest fans of some of these. I'm looking at R290 propane, for example, right? Typically, we know propane goes boom. Well, lots of other refrigerants can go boom as well, but certain ones have been vilified, but we can use them if used in the correct manner, and it can be done in a safe way. There's also lots and lots of information on refrigerants that we can utilize in terms of getting their global warming potential information out of, whether it be equipment life expectancy, like the greenhouse gas protocols, or LEED has information like that. There's also refrigerant leakage rates for different types of equipment, and obviously the actual refrigerants themselves that can come from the US EPA, CIBSE TM65, BREEAM, again, the greenhouse gas protocol, or ASHRAE 228P. And then there's actual refrigerant environmental metrics out there in the marketplace, again, from a lot of the same organizations, where we can start to understand, okay, if I'm using R417A versus R434A, what are my impacts going to be and how are they going to be different? These are incredibly important aspects to grab onto and utilize as we start to understand our embodied impacts while we lower those operational impacts. An example is something like a refrigerant in a chiller, right? Again, just randomly picking someone, please don't take this as an endorsement or anything like this, but a building life expectancy is 60 years, right? It's 33,000 square feet, and we've got a specialized chiller here, 110 tons, refrigerant charge is 48 kilograms. The life expectancy of that refrigerant is 20 years per the greenhouse gas protocol. But the leakage is where we start to say, okay, at installation, we're going to lose 1%. Annually, we're going to lose 15% of refrigerant to leakage. And end of life recovery, we're basically going to lose whatever's left. And again, this is all dictated here in the US by EPA regulations. Obviously, Canada also has regulations. A number of countries around the world have their own regulations. But then we start to understand, okay, what is the actual impact of all that, right? The refrigerant environmental metrics, tools like CIBSE TM65 actually talks about, okay, out of this, your global warming potential then is 2,088 kilograms per CO2 equivalent. That's a scary number, right? And so we think we're doing well in terms of using R410A to lower our operational carbon. But when it comes to the embodied impact, we could actually be fairly high. Again, that total refrigerant loss and environmental impact, we try and put numbers here on it, but when you start to do over its lifetime, right, and the lifetime refrigerant leakage, not just the end of life, we try and, again, annual leakage over 20 years, plus the end of life recovery. We do get to recover some of it, not as much as we should, but the lifetime refrigerant leakage is 146.88 kilograms. Plus the total refrigerant GWP emissions is 306,685 kilograms per CO2 equivalent. So this is the actual in-use phase. This is the embodied phase that we're losing. Look what it does when you're actually talking the environmental impact. It's like using 34,000 plus gallons of gasoline being consumed, or over 55, almost 56 homes electricity usage in 1 year. That's a massive impact, right? Just from the refrigerant alone. So, what are we trying to do? Again, how can we start getting lower and lower, right? How can we get below some of these numbers? Again, our fancy little GIF over here, our meme, where we're talking about, the refrigerant comparisons where you're talking just massive, massive amounts. The refrigerant global warming potential is 920,000 kilograms per CO2 equivalent, yet the building's total global warming potential is 1.8. So you're talking almost half, or actually a little over half, is from the refrigerant. That is a massive, massive amount of impact that we are addressing just from the refrigerant area. The good thing is, at MEP2040.org, we actually have a refrigerant impact calculator that can actually go through the refrigerant data sets. You can actually pull up where you actually, which type of product, what's your leakage rate, what's your leakage rate, and it can actually give you some environmental results. So it can actually start to do some of this emission equivalents for you and the environmental impact and things of that nature. Obviously, we have lots of disclaimers on this that we're pulling data from these systems. But again, please feel free to use. It's free to the public, MEP2040.org, to go into the refrigerant impact calculator to take a look. Additionally, within here, we also, and I'll touch on a little bit of each of these, we have letters, template letters at MEP2040.org, where we actually talk about what you as an engineer can go out to the marketplace and say. We actually have a sustainable refrigerant for MEP systems call to action letter, where we're asking suppliers of material to lower and to give us data to help lower the impacts that we have from the refrigerant world. So again, we have 3 letters up there right now. This one specifically is on the refrigerant world. I'll get to the MEP equipment product transparency in a bit, and the subcontractor takeoff data. We're trying to get more data out of the marketplace from subcontractors on projects. But again, you can take these letters, put your own date, put your own, people you're sending it to, and put your company's name on there and go from there. Again, different countries have started to come up with different rules around these things. We hope those will start to address things. We just don't know if they'll be addressing things as quickly as we need them to. So there are other reporting mechanisms around this. The goal is to have some central location for concise environmental reporting. Databases such as AIA's DDX tracking. Tracking the refrigerants is our first priority. And we're actually in conversations with some other folks that are looking to do some of the same things, so we can all use the same database to actually report some of this information. Again, more information at MEP2040.org on all of this. So that's the refrigerant section. EPD section, I'm able to talk a lot more in depth on the EPD section, this is an area where I'm a subject matter expert. I've helped write a good deal of the environmental product declaration or life cycle assessment requirements. Certainly in America, I've also helped a little bit in the Canadian government area as well in terms of the use of environmental product declarations. Again, so I'm showing you the life cycle assessment again. Operational, again, is here in this area, the B6 to C7. Everything else is embodied impact of material. So when we're talking about mechanical, electrical, and plumbing material, right, there's all these other areas that we haven't really been counting their environmental impact, specifically their global warming potential, or, the colloquial that is being used in the marketplace now is embodied carbon, right? That's the fun marketing term that's getting used for the more technical terms like global warming potential or greenhouse gas emissions into our environment. As you all probably know, carbon is just one of the greenhouse gases that can actually flow into our atmosphere and impact our environment. So again, all these other areas can be captured in a different way. Again, just highlighting where the operational here is and how small it is, even though it has a very outsized impact, considering where it is. So again, after establishing a company plan, after looking at low GWP refrigerants, how to start asking for environmental product declarations. So what the heck are EPDs? They're exactly what they sound like. They are a declaration, not a guarantee, but just a declaration of the impact that a product has when it is made on the environment, right? These are important because they're actually giving us data that we haven't gotten in the past, right? So, XYZ product saves a certain amount of operational energy. That's great. But how much energy did it take to make that product? We've never really had that full discussion of that total carbon concept. There's a couple different types of EPDs available in the marketplace. There's industry-wide EPDs. There's also product-specific EPDs. Industry-wide EPDs would be preferred today, so we could start to understand what the entire marketplace is doing. Where we're starting to get mechanical equipment specifically is in product-specific EPDs, which is good. Preferred here is a strong word. I would say both of them are able to help us. Again, we don't have very many industry-wide in the mechanical area. In the plumbing area, we're starting to have industry-wide. Again, this is a group of organizations getting together where individual product manufacturers are submitting their data, and we're saying, okay, here's what all these different sorts of products, here's what their average is. That allows us to set baselines and say, hey, here's what I wouldn't want to be above is the industry average. I want products to be below. So it's sort of a step process, industry-wide to product specific. And again, there are different organizations throughout North America, which are what called EPD program operators that are essentially third-party validation organizations for the data that is within them. So again, I talked about what is an EPD. It is a transparency disclosure. I want to make sure people understand that. It is not a guarantee of anything. It is not like other standards that you see from International Code Council or ASTM or some of these other organizations that says a product with this label guarantees a certain level of performance. That's not what these are. This is simply outright stating, here is what our impact is when we produce this chiller, for example, or this cooling tower, or this piece of cabling, or this plumbing pipe. This is that, again, just simply tell you straight up, this is what it is. So what's in the environmental product declaration? The second page of almost every EPD details kind of general declaration information, which basically the most important part there is a declared functional unit. Like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about one chiller? Are we talking about 1 meter of piping? Are we talking about a tonnage of a certain product? What does the EPD represent? That way you as an engineer can say, okay, I bought 4 of these. Therefore, my impact is 4 times what the environmental product declaration is. It also gives you a lot of basic information about the material's origins, the physics, the building physics about where the product is utilized and things of that nature. Again, the manufacturing process of the product, the installation and in-use conditions. But then it also gives test results and verifications to some of the other standards that are in the marketplace for that product. But the most important part is the actual results. So this is what it'll typically look like. On an EPD, it will give you a table that says, here are the impact areas that when this product is made, here is the impacts for these different categories. Everything from global warming potential, ozone depletion, acidification potential, eutrophication potential, photochemical ozone creation, and then abiotic resource depletion, both fossil fuels and natural. So again, you see all these and you're like, okay, that's a lot more acronyms being thrown at me. This is the one, this top one right here, the global warming potential. When people talk about embodied carbon and lowering embodied carbon, this is the number they're looking at, right? This is the area where they're specifically talking about. Then you see all these categories broken up. Remember, I talked about the life cycle assessment back here. These individual module areas actually break out in the EPD to the different impact areas. Obviously, I've chosen an LCA that doesn't have a use phase. So this isn't a chiller per se, but it may be a pipe or something along those lines where there's no use phase energy. So the B column is gone. Most of the time, what you're hearing people be able to report is on their A1 to A3. So this is what's called cradle to gate, meaning the manufacturer taking stuff out of the ground, having it shipped to their factory or the components that they're purchasing from their supply chain into their factory, they put it together, and then they ship it to either another reseller or to the job site. So again, cradle to gate is another term you may hear. That is referring to A1 to A3. A4, again, and A5 start to get into construction and things of that nature. Again, the B level is about the use phase. The C level is the end of life. There's also a D phase that is not represented here for this product, which actually talks more about circularity and things of that nature. But when you hear someone talking about the embodied carbon impact of a product, it is typically this number right here, global warming potential in the A1 to A3 range. That's not to say that the other impact categories don't count. They do. They do matter longer term. Not every EPD has all these other columns filled because of the rules governing life cycle assessments in EPDs today. This is all that is required in things like LEED and other green rating systems. So this is where primarily most of the environmental product declarations are coming in today. So again, there's the global warming potential and the important impact there. Again, we have a template letter on MEP2040.org. It's called the MEP Equipment Product Transparency Letter, where you can go in, grab it. It says, hey, equipment manufacturer, I'm so-and-so from this firm. I would like you to start undertaking these concepts to get us data that we can start making choices with. Based on embodied carbon and EPDs. The preliminary timeline that we've worked up earlier this year, we talked about using something called CIBSE TM65. The CIBSE TM65 is a program where engineering firms can just simply get some data from manufacturers and do a calculation that gets you a little bit there in terms of the embodied carbon. It's fairly off in other areas, but in our letter that I talked about back here, what we're saying is, hey, for right now, give me this data for TM65, but within a year's time, we would like you to move to EPDs. EPDs are created from what are called life cycle assessment. It actually gets you more credible data and more complete set of data than TM65 does. So while today we'll accept this, we would like you all to move to EPDs in the coming future. And as you can see, these things start to move as they go. We're talking basically condensing units out here being CIBSE TM65, but in 2024, we'd like those to have EPDs. We'd like water-cooled chillers to be in the TM65 world in 2024, but in 2025, we would like them all to start moving to EPDs and things of that nature. So again, this is the timeline that we're working with MEP 2040. What we're actually finding, though, is some people are putting EPD requirements in their procurement requirements. Some very large owners and operators, a lot of the major tech firms are saying, hey, we want an EPD now. We recognize you don't have it today, but we're not going to put your chiller, for example, on our roof for 18 months. So we're going to agree to buy it from you today, but in 18 months, you better have an EPD. So we're actually ahead of this in some areas and behind this timeline in other areas. So again, we've kind of hit the three different major buckets. You need to have a company plan for how you're going to go about this. We're asking you to look to low global warming potential refrigerants, obviously not just in the operational phase, but in the embodied carbon phase, the leakage rates and things of that nature. How do we treat refrigerants better? We're asking you to ask for environmental product declarations, which are based on life cycle assessment data for individual products. And that can be staged over time. Doesn't have to be an overnight thing. We, prefer you tell people, hey, we're going to be asking for this life cycle assessment data through EPDs within a year, or we're going to move on to organizations that have them. Finally, though, we want you to participate and be part of the MEP 2040 groups. And just being part of the Carbon Leadership Forum community, as you are up in Alberta, is great. It's a great start. You understand a lot of the terminology that I'm throwing out. We don't have to, relearn absolutely everything. But we have different working groups where we're trying to communicate what MEP 2040 is doing. We're talking about data analysis and reporting. We're trying to set up partnerships with other organizations and more engineering firms and more supporters. And then we have a manufacturers and EPDs working group, as we talked about, how to get more data out of the system to make choices about. One way to participate is we have these quarterly forums. We just had our most recent one in September. We talked, individual working groups went through and actually talked about what was going on in their working groups. And then we actually had individual presentations. We had people present on the whole carbon case studies that were going on. And then we had individual panelists come by to talk about what they're seeing in the marketplace out of embodied carbon in the MEP system. We've had everyone from the US federal government to individual manufacturers be presenters on these webinars. So we really think they're valuable. And also the panelists coming through and asking questions, getting questions asked of them has been incredibly valuable. So again, it's an area where we're pretty proud of what we're starting to create in the marketplace with MEP 2040. Again, it's www.mep2040.org. It's a free organization to join. Obviously, it just takes your time, which it does take a significant amount of time depending on what we're doing for different things. So that's pretty much who we are. I know that was quick, but we always want to make sure we leave time for questions and answers. So I'm more than willing to answer any questions anyone has currently, or talk through any of what I brought up during the conversation.
Thank you, Josh. That was a great run through. Nothing in the chat yet. I know I can say for myself, wow, those leakage rates at the beginning that you showed were astounding.
Scary?
Yeah.
Scary is the most important word that comes up. It's it is a scary. The good and bad thing about data is the moment the data gets shared with you, you can never unlearn it. So when it's scary, it's like, ooh, this is not fun. But the great thing is you can't really make change without data, right? So that's a big part of MEP 2040 is we kind of tell each other different things we're learning throughout time, certainly at the steering group level, but then also at the individual, as I mentioned, at the quarterly forums and such. We're not just getting those of us who are involved, but others who are doing things involved to come out and really bring in different sort of concepts that they've learned and different ideas and different projects, case studies and things like that. And you can see this was about whole carbon case studies. So, balancing operational versus embodied and things of that nature. So I think I just saw someone ask a question in Q&A. I can jump right in it if you want.
Yeah, I see it. I can let you know there. It's an anonymous question. It says, what kind of costs can be expected for the EPDs for a manufacturer? So lots of products, any advice on how to select what products to get these for?
Yeah, so again, it's brand new. So thank you very much for the question, whoever that was. So you've got a couple different things here, and I want to make sure that I'm understanding exactly what you're asking. What kind of cost can be expected for manufacturers to get an EPD, meaning how much does it cost for the manufacturer to get it? Let's go through that first. So as more and more life cycle assessments are done, the easier and the cheaper these things are taking. The less time they're taking, the less expensive they're becoming. At the moment, obviously on the mechanical side, these are fairly complex products, right? A chiller, rooftop units, HVAC systems. These are really complicated products with lots and lots and lots of components. So these things do take time. So you're talking probably, $20,000 to do a life cycle assessment and get that through the system. A little bit more to have it fully recognized as an EPD. So Most of the time, a manufacturer is doing this when it is a requirement of a specification today. When you start to get to like electrical, like wiring, cable, plumbing systems like piping, it's much less than that because it's much less complex products. For example, copper wiring, PVC around wiring and things of that nature. They're fairly simple products. Piping, whether it be metal piping or again, some sort of plastic piping system. Those are fairly easier systems to do. So you're talking a couple thousands of dollars to undertake an EPD. What we try to do as a life cycle assessment provider is we try and group lots of things. So we try and have people do life cycle assessments in multitudes. Don't do one thing, because doing one thing once, all of a sudden those costs are going to start to add up. Let's try and create families of products where very similar things can be done at the same time, because as we're modeling one thing, hey, these things are sort of the same, but this product's a little bit different. But again, we've created the model. They're both created in the same factory. So let's go from there and be able to create those two models at the same time, do all the LCA data gathering at the same time. So you're creating decreased cost due to working at scale. So that's what we're trying to do nowadays. And obviously, the more data we collect, the easier it's going to be to collect. The time, cost will continue to go down over time. The second part of that is any advice on how to select what products to get these for. So again, we've kind of created this timeline on MEP 2040. At the moment, in theory, in 3 months, we should be able to have EPDs for all these types of products. But as I mentioned, we know some chillers and some AHUs who are going through the system now that we're doing life cycle assessments for. So again, it's really up to you to ask, right? Like, just ask the manufacturer, utilize these letters that are saying, hey, we understand you may not have an LCA today. We would like to see one in the future, though, coming. And again, there are certain product types. These are mostly the mechanical products, but in wiring and in piping and things of that nature, certainly other building products, building envelope type material, concrete, steel, flooring systems, stuff that you guys may not be directly involved with, but you certainly understand, all have EPDs today. Lots and lots of EPDs in the building product marketplace. It's just we haven't moved through the MEP marketplace today. So again, just simply asking, hey, do you have LCA data? Kind of shocks some of these systems into moving through. And worst comes to worst, understanding the TM65 system and what data you could collect from the manufacturer today to at least give you a guesstimate to an embodied impact is a good start. And again, those letters describe that.
Nice. No, thank you for answering that. No questions coming up through. I know I have one. I'm just wondering, I know you just came back from Green Build and all that fun stuff. I'm just wondering if there was any kind of recent, success story, or, how often are those letters being downloaded, or just kind of anything over the last little bit that's been really, I don't know, transformative for MEP 2040.
Yeah, so really, really good news on this front. I can't give names. I've asked to give the names, and I'm hoping for an okay here shortly from the organization. But we directly know of a very large tech firm. I gave a presentation on mechanical embodied carbon at Greenbuild, and I highlighted this there as well. Again, without the name, unfortunately, but very large tech firm that has started putting EPDs in their specifications. We know directly of one that led to 3 mechanical rooftop unit products that have to do LCAs now, that are going through the process, which they will then be able to give to other engineers and other teams once they're done, because this organization, this very large tech firm, said, look, we're going to need it for one of our buildings, but the building's not going to be built for 18, or not going to be finalized for 18 months. You have 18 months to create an EPD for us. You will be out of compliance if you don't have that EPD. These EPDs through the LCA process can be created probably in about 5 to 8 months. So that's absolutely plenty of time to be able to create an EPD for these systems, even if they're fairly complex and take even longer than a normal LCA does. But we saw that almost immediately. literally we saw literally the letter went out, and days later we had multiple conversations with different suppliers saying, hey, we've been selected, we need an EPD, let's have the conversation. And they're already moving down the path within, a month of having their selves chosen for a spec. A different organization, another tech firm with lots of buildings, also has put out an EPD requirement for lighting. So we've been getting calls from lighting manufacturers that are saying, hey, we want to go through the process of understanding our impacts through life cycle assessment so that we can get EPDs for our lighting. Because again, they're being chosen or have the potential to be chosen by some of these very large firms. So it doesn't always feel like specs are listened to. I certainly understand that, where we hear again and again from the marketplace, oh, we can't do this, oh, we can't do that, oh, we can't do this. And not everyone works for, nor is contracted by a very, very large tech organization. I certainly understand that, with millions of dollars or billions of dollars at their purchasing power. But every little bit counts. And as these start to trickle through the system, you folks should start being able to see them in 2024 shortly, where you'll start to see more and more EPDs on specific mechanical equipment. Again, there is a decent amount of electrical equipment that's out there now in the cabling side of things. Plumbing has some as well, as I mentioned, along with all the structural material for buildings. And certainly fixture and fit out information. There's a lot of EPDs. So the more that it gets asked for, the more that it completes the ecosystem of the marketplace. But those are two pretty straightforward, like, hey, letters went out. People are getting involved now. Manufacturers are getting involved to create these LCAs to answer the call, because, hey, they wanted to win the bid. So they agreed to be able to go through the system. So again, the specifications are a big, big deal.
Wow, that's a great story. Market movement in action. I guess
I'm really hoping. I was actually with the one of the major tech firms last week at Greenbuild, and I begged the person. I was like, please let me tell your story. I'm like, it's really good publicity for you guys if you just let me say how cool you are. So I'm still waiting for the approval. It's only been about a month since this all happened. So I'm sure it takes multiple layers at some of these organizations to be able to get someone to say how cool you are. But I am very hopeful that someday they will be able to tell me that I can talk about them in public.
Absolutely. And I'm assuming, just to tag onto that question, it was more around transparency. There weren't any like requirements for it to be a certain level of impacts. It was just around transparency only at this point.
At this point, for the MEP equipment, you're correct. It's just we just want transparency into what we're buying. Right. And to be honest, it's because these firms these large organizations have carbon requirements that the marketplace is now asking of them. Right. So Wall Street investment firms are now asking, what is your true carbon footprint? Right. And what is your plan to reduce it? So they're having to understand that now. So they need that transparency. Right. But you are correct. There are certain product types in the marketplace that are now having global warming potential maximums put on them. Those are more around concrete, steel, asphalt, glass, even mineral wallboard insulation in the state of California is going to have a global warming potential cap. But none of this MEP equipment yet has an actual GWP maximum in any jurisdiction that I know of. The reason being is we just don't have enough knowledge to set those maximums, right? Concrete, steel, these other types of products, we have a fairly good idea of what average looks like, even a little worse than average. So like the state of California has part of their building code, something called Cal Green. And they have passed something that starting next July 1st, 2024, for any building over 100,000 square feet or school that is over 50,000 square feet, you will either have to do a whole building life cycle assessment, which requires a lot of this data and information. You will need to have GWP below a certain number for a number of the products I just mentioned: steel, structural steel, rebar, concrete, glass, mineral wallboard insulation, things of that nature. Or you reuse a certain percentage of the of a building already in existence. So again, you're seeing it moved into code, these GWP maximums. The U.S. federal government has a through our Inflation Reduction Act, has billions of dollars to purchase low embodied carbon material that has GWP maximums and is ratcheting down. The government of Canada is going through some of the similar concepts where they are rewarding products that are lower GWP, but again, it's more in the structural sense, not in the MEP sense today. But I can certainly envision down the road where a total carbon conversation, a total carbon limit for the lifetime of a product, for example, is something that comes to the mechanical space.
Absolutely. Thank you. That makes sense. And there's no more questions. We've got a quiet bunch today. Yeah, I will just say thank you so much for your time. That was very exciting to learn about a new and kind of underserved area in embodied carbon so far. So thank you for your work in that area, and it's exciting to see.
Yeah, no, and thank you. Again, if you guys have any questions, I flashed my email up there, josh@wapsustainability.com. I know not everyone's comfortable asking questions in a forum, but yeah, and then MEP2040.org. Stop on by, take a read, stop by one of our forums. I believe our next one is, I believe towards the end of the year. I believe we're going to have another one in December. Hopefully not around the holidays, hopefully a little before the holidays. We schedule that, but the announcements go up on MEP2040.org all the time. Get on our mailing list, use the letters, ask questions. We're a friendly bunch for the most part. We're fairly committed to the lowering the carbon, but otherwise we're a friendly group. So stop on by.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you everybody, and we'll post this video on clfalberta.com, so feel free to go back and miss anything or share, and of course please visit the website again to register for those events upcoming for Buildex. So we'll looking forward to see everybody in person in Calgary then. Okay, thanks everybody.
All right, thank you.
Have a great day.
Have a great day.